den a já vás tady všichni vítám na přednášce. Doufám, že všichni víte, že se teď odehraje přednáška Lucy Marchettiho. Pokud nevíte, tak vězte a zůstaňte s to vítání. Luca Marchetti bude mluvit o haptickém, hmatovém umění a vůbec o hmatu jako o potenciálně estetickém smyslu. A já ho teda představím v angličtině, aby věděl, co o něm říkám. So welcome, Luca. Thank you for coming. Luca has just arrived from Jihlava, where he was in a jury of VR section. And next to VR theory or theory of virtual reality, he's also interested in many different topics, actually. I heard him speaking about the experience of architecture, and today we will have this other topic that he started exploring, haptic art. Luca comes from Genoa in Italy. He's there at a project that is called Philosophy of Experiential Artifacts. And his boss there, Enrico Terone, was here a year ago as well on an invitation. I'm Teresa Hadramová from the Department of Aesthetics in Prague, but this lecture was made possible thanks to Are, Les, and Zuzana Blochová, and of course CS, Centrum pro současné umění. Moc děkujeme. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Teresa. So can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay. So thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Susanna. Thanks, Anna. Thank to Are and to the Center for Contemporary Arts Prague. I'm very glad to be here, in fact. And this place is incredible. So it's the first time that I have a lecture in an environment like this. So I'm a philosopher. How many of you have a background in philosophy? Okay. And the others is arts or okay. Okay. Well, I'm a philosopher interested in aesthetics. Well, in fact, I'm more a philosopher of mind, I would say, but I work between philosophy of mind and aesthetics. And as Teresa said, I am interested in very different topics. So I mainly worked on pictorial experience and what it is like to experience pictures. I've got now a project on architecture, so on the way in which we experience buildings and so on. I've got a project on virtual reality, and again, it's on what we experience when we enter virtual worlds. Jihlava Film Festival, by the way, is incredible, so if you have the chance to go there, also to see the virtual reality experience is really great. And I also have a project on animal minds, so I'm interested in the way in which we experience the world, both as human and other animals, so that's basically what I do. And I'm particularly interested in the way in which we experience the world through the arts. This project that I think it's the second time that I present this thing, well, it's a new thing that I'm working on with Camillou Palazzolo, which is a colleague of mine in Genoa. She's a PhD student, and she is the more related to the art person. I'm more the perception mind person. She is really the expert on contemporary art, and I'm sorry she will not be here. But so yeah, it's a joint project, and yeah, that's the title: Haptic Arts and the Aesthetics of Touch. And why are we interested in this topic? So. In Western culture, basically, or in Western aesthetics, it seems that touch is marginalized, both in the arts, in the practice of arts, has been marginalized, and also in reflection, in aesthetics reflection. So if we take the idea, and I think that's what Enrico last year talked about in here, so that we can classify arts and art modality through the sensory modality that they mainly engage us with, we can say that, well, we have a class of arts that we classify because they are experienced mainly through vision, and this is like paintings and photography and sculpture and architecture maybe also, if you read Roger Scruton's Philosophy of Architecture, Aesthetics of Architecture. we have a sense modality which is hearing that has another kind of form of arts which is related to it, that's music. We have also emerging sensory recognition with other sensory modality like taste, so we have like now the fine arts of culinary arts, and smell and its perfumery. But it doesn't seem that we have a category of arts that are the arts of touch, right? So there's no established category of the arts that are defined by our engagement through tactile experiences. We cannot usually touch the things that are in museums, even if we would like to, even if they are contemporary arts that are meant to be touched. Sometimes we cannot do that. There are reasons for that, conservatory reason and so on and so forth. But yeah, so the idea is that on the one hand, practically, we don't have like this definition, and on the other also there's not a recognition in the realm of the arts for touch. This has consequences. So it seems that there's limited exploration of what tactile perception gives us aesthetically or artistically. We don't have a language. We have a rich visual lexicon for aesthetic properties that come from vision or for audition, but if we try to define and describe the experiences that we have through touch, it seems that we are very limited in trying to describe them. Think about it. Yeah, but and from this emerges a contradiction. So touch is so central in our engagement with the world, and this is what we're going to see in the second part of the presentation. But the idea is that the artworks and in general objects' tactile properties remain, on the one hand, understudied, and on the other, undervalued. And yeah, so the idea of this presentation is to give a first analysis of what an aesthetics of touch would look like. Given that it's true that today touch is started to get re-entered also in the museums, right? So we have, for example, museums tours that are meant for touch, right? We can touch sculptures. There are these tours for not only blind people, but for everyone. We have installations that focus on our interaction through tactile experiences, like Ernesto Neto's ones or other kind of things. And we will see them in a little bit. But the idea is that we don't have concepts to describe a lot of them. And we know that there has been, in the 20th century mainly, an effort to get touch the recognition that it should have even in the art realm. This is Marcel Duchamp, Prier de Toucher, for example. And you here have this great example by Jan Zwangmeier, which has this amazing book on basically tactile arts, which is great, and thanks Teresa for introducing me to that. And so there has been something in the arts, and there has been something on the philosophy, but and here we get into the philosophical side of the problem. So the idea is that touch is not aesthetically interesting, and there are at least three philosophical arguments that have been raised for this. So the first one is that it's supposedly a simple sense. So while vision and audition are very complex senses, so we get a lot out of our visual engagement with the world and our auditory engagement with the world. The idea is that the sensory deliverances of smell, taste, and touch don't have this formal complexity. So we don't get much out of tactile engaging with the world. So that's one reason in which we could disregard touch as an aesthetic sense. And has been done in the philosophy. Another challenge arises from the fact that touch and other proximal senses are thought as being inherently private, and the idea is that they lack an intersubjectively shareable experience, which is one of the main features of what aesthetic experience has been described as having in the aesthetic Western tradition. And another counter-argument to introducing the touch into the modality through which we can have an interesting aesthetic engagement with the world is like an argument from linguistic conservatism, which means that, well, in the aesthetic realm, we have developed this kind of language, vocabulary that describes aesthetics, experiences, and this is meant to be and applied, and this has been developed through through a description of vision, visual qualities or auditory qualities, but we shouldn't extend, in fact, the term aesthetic to touch, because, and we will see it in a little, because touch is merely it's just giving us pleasure in a way that is not merely hedonic or sensory pleasure, not aesthetic pleasure, and I will try to explain in a little bit what that does mean. There has been recently, and these are two things that have just been published, in fact, in the philosophy of aesthetics, that tries to overcome also this kind of lack of literature and of analysis of the aesthetics of touch. This one is an edited collection edited by Ken Wilder and Aaron McPeak, and this is great, just been published in this open access on UCL Press, and it is being the result of a project that has been going on for a couple of years in the UK, also related to Tate, and this brilliant project on the aesthetics of touch. And the other one is, again, a published collection, just been edited in the Slovak Journal of Aesthetics, in which there are a lot of things on the aesthetics of touch. But what we think is that there is not in the literature a systematic attempt to describe and to give an account of what's interesting about the aesthetics of touch on the one hand, and what is, or what are possibly what we could call, and what we will call, the haptic arts. So this is the plan of the talk after this long introduction. The plan of the talk is that in the first part of it, I will talk about tactile experience. And so it's more a philosophy of mind part of the paper. And we will see that the touch is not a simple sense, it's complex. It's related with our agency and our bodily awareness in general, and there are a lot of tactile properties which are interesting. In the second part of the talk, I will talk a little bit about what are the pleasures that touch can give us, and related to the notion of everyday aesthetics. So this field of aesthetics, which is interested in analyzing our aesthetic engagement with everyday objects and experiences. And then in the third part, we will go finally into the realm of the arts, and we will try to give a definition of what a category of haptic arts could be, and which are or could be the case, the different works of art that can get into this category. So tactile experience first. So no one is a philosopher here. Well, no, someone of you is a philosopher. I come from this tradition of a philosophy of mind, which is in the realm of analytic philosophy. I will not explain what analytic philosophy is, but we care very much about definition and defining clearly stuff. So before everything, let's try to describe what I mean with experience in this talk. So experience is, I define it as a conscious mental episode or state that presents its subject with a distinctive phenomenal character. What it is like. So this is the standard definition of what is a qualitative state in the literature. There's what it is like to be, there are what it is like to be in that state. So the state has a phenomenology. So every time that I say that there's a phenomenology of something, it means there's something it is like to, for example, feel pain, or seeing red, or seeing black, or seeing a three-dimensional shape. there's a qualitative character of the experience. The qualitative character is the redness of the experience, is the painfulness of the experience. So we are human, so we are conscious being, and the consciousness is defined by what it is like of experience the world. And this is not of all the experiences that we could have. This is drawn from another philosopher of mine, which is Uriah Kriegel. There's this book, The Varieties of Experiences, in which he define and classifies the different phenomenologies that we can have based on, well, first-person rapport. So we have sensory phenomenology on the one hand and non-sensory phenomenologies on the other. Well, sensory phenomenologies are the one that gives us access to sensory data, basically. So we have perceptual experiences like visual, audition, auditory, gustatory, tactile, and olfactory phenomenologies, which are basically the phenomenology of what it is like to taste the world, to see the world, to smell it, and so on. We have a phenomenology which is tied to the pain or the pleasure of the experiences. We can feel pain, which can be sensory and bodily pain. We can feel also psychological pain, and we can feel pleasure. See, this is algedonic phenomenology. We have imagination, which can be sensory. When we think about and try to imagine an elephant flying in the room, try to visualize it, I can almost see it. That's sensory imagination. And then we have all this kind of non-sensory phenomenology. For example, I can think about something, and thinking about something is something it is like to think about it, right? We have a phenomenology of desire. So there's something it is like to desire something, to desire to have a sip of water, for example, and now I'm satisfying it. Well, that's just to give you a sense of what we weird philosophers do in our professional lives. And this is the main book I will draw for the first part of the presentation. It's called The First Sense, and it's by Matthew Fulkerson, published by MIT Press. It's a great book about, well, basically the experience of touch from a philosopher. And as I said, touch is a complex sense. So on the one hand, it's physiologically functionally diverse, and I will explain what that does mean. And it's also phenomenologically diverse, and also. So why it's physiologically and functionally diverse? So on the one hand, if we think about vision or audition, we can say that there's a single sensory organ. So we have the eyes for vision, we have the hair for hearing, but it seems that touch is more complex. So it's not limited on the skin, even if it starts on the skin, the feeling of touch. But the skin itself contains a lot of receptors. Receptors are the part of the nervous system that are meant to conduct the feelings that we feel on our skin to the brain. And we have mechanoreceptors that are sensible to pressure, stretch, and vibration. We have thermoreceptors that are part of the somatosensory system that are meant to code basically temperature. We have nociceptors that are meant to code pain. So when we feel pain, are these kind of fibers that are activated. And then we will see also there's a class of fibers. This is something special to touch. Fibers that are conducting pleasurable sensations, and we will see why. So it's physiologically is a complex sense. It's meant to deliver a lot of information to the brain, basically, a lot of different information. Moreover, touch is also something that we exploratorily do. So there's this part of agency through touch. So when we touch something, we explore it. So it's temporally structured, and also it's related to the way in which we move, to proprioception, to the bodily awareness of moving. So there are also, physiologically, when we touch something, it's not only the experience of the mechanoreceptors that are touching the body, but also the experience of coming from the receptors that are located into our muscles, joints, and tendons that are activated. So we can, again, functionally distinguish between two kinds of touch. Passive touch on the one hand, which is the touch in which we are just touched by something, we are not exploring it, and active touch, or haptic touch, in which our exploratory movement in the words are related. Yeah, we can skip this. And since it's such a diverse and structured and different and complex sensory system, it is also phenomenologically very diverse and composite. So that's the basic idea. So as I said before, the phenomenology is what it is like to experience something. When we experience something through touch, we have all these components that goes into the experience. We have cutaneous components, so we feel properties that comes from the mechanic of touch. So pressure, vibration, surface contact. We have thermal components, so we experience the temperature of an object or of an environment. We have nociceptive components. It can feel pleasurable or painful to touch something, for example, or being touched by something. We have the component that come from our bodily movement, from our agency of exploring the things. And then we can also have, as we will see, affective components. So the result is that touch, if you think about it, seems a simple sense, but in fact it's really, really complex. So it's a multidimensional and multimodal sense. A little more on haptic touch, so the touch that we engage in when we explore the world tactically. So we are not passive receptors, but we use our bodily movement to explore objects. If we think about it, the content, this is another complexity of the experience of touch. Touching something, it's exploring something through time, so it has a temporal structure, right? So this is also something interesting. So a temporally distributed structure that is dependent on the perceiver exploratory strategy. So I quote Fulkerson: we encounter an object by picking it up, rolling it around the end, squeezing it, pressing against it, tracing its outline. And we perceive the object shape and form and as this behavior unfolds over time. So it's a temporally structured sense. And Alva Noe, which is written in 2004, this amazing book which is called Action in Perception, also says that there's something else which is interesting temporally about the experience of touch. And it's the fact that in any moment I touch something, I also have a sense of what I will touch afterwards. So why? Well, because if I have vision, I can also forward what I will experience afterwards. So that's the idea, that the perception is more complex. It's not in a moment, but it's built on also what the sensory motor system knows. So agency on the one hand and bodily awareness on the other. So whenever we touch something, we are in contact with something. So we can say that touch is a contact sense, and that's cool, right? Because well, there are some interesting philosophical implications I will not talk about here, but the idea is that for the phenomenology, for what it is like, and I think this will be also interesting for the appreciation and the aesthetics of touch. But the idea is that touch is a bipolar mode. So the idea is that in audition or in vision, we don't experience both the objects outside the world and our experience, or the body that is perceiving the object, so our eyes that are experiencing. While through touch, when we touch something, we experience the quality of the object, but we also experience what it's like to touch something, and so we experience the bodily awareness of touching something. So it's said that touch has this bipolar nature. So when we touch something, we represent mentally and in our perceptual experience both the qualities of the objects outside and the qualities of our body that is touching the objects. So there's an example there. For example, feeling the hardness of a table involves concurrent awareness of the table's resistance and the pressure exerted in one's hand. So again, touch is a complicated sense. A contact sense, yes, as I said, but there's also something interesting about touch, which is not related to immediate contact, but that touch can also be mediated, and we can still perceive the properties of the objects that are experienced through something intermediate. And this is what is called distal touch. So, for example, blind people, when they use the cane, they are experiencing the world outside, but they are experiencing it through another object. And the idea is that they can get the properties of, for example, the soil or what they are experiencing through a stick, even through the stick itself. So this further complicates the experience of touch. So to touch, we can experience the property of the object we are touching, of the cane, the property of the object that cane is touching, the third object, and also our hands that are touching. And so, if the philosophical objection is, well, touch is a simple sense, well, then not true. It's a complex sense. So there's a lot that artists can get into it. And just to resume tactile properties, so basically to resume the thing, but the sense of touch has a number of experiential dimensions. So on the one hand, it involves the sensitivity to properties of objects, pressure, hardness, texture, warmth and cold, and spatial properties too of the objects that we are touching. So how the object is posed, for example, or edge surface orientation of the objects. But through touch, apart from the properties of the object, we have also the experience of the properties of our bodies that are touching the object. So hardness, texture, and so on of our body, motion, position of our body that is touching the object. And properties of the experience itself. So properties, for example, tingling, itching, and burning. So the fact that these are not properties of the object or of the body in general, but of the experiences that we are having. And so yeah, that's basically the first part of the presentation, trying to respond to the objection, well, touch is a simple sense, so it shouldn't be interesting, nor perceptually, nor aesthetically. But it's not so simple, it's complex. And I'm sorry about the philosophical part of that. So a little moment of yesterday I found this, basically. Have you ever heard about this book or the project? Well, so Paolo Zuccotti basically wandered around the world and asked the people to number the things that they touch during a day. And then she picked all the things that they said and made photographs out of them. And this is the results. So basically, the idea is that you reconstruct the story of a person's day or a person's life through the things that they touch. And this is, I think, really, really cool. So what do you think? What do you think about this? Who is this person? Who does she do? Or he do? Or he does? It seems so. Here doesn't say, it just says the name of is a woman, but doesn't say but what does he do? Or she do?
Cooking.
This one?
He's a rider.
What?
He's a horse rider.
Horse rider, yes, he's a cowboy from Tucson, Arizona. You see? Yeah, sorry about the quality of the images, but that's the best I found. This one.
Oh, I can read it there.
Ah, you can read it. Yeah, that's true. An artist, basically. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. This is easy. But yeah, I found that's amazing. So the idea is that, well, we touch a great number of things. So basically, that's our first contact to the world, right? Well, vision is super central, of course, but we touch stuff every day, and these things have a lot of import. But who is it? Yeah, a 2-year-old from Tokyo. But yeah, so we touch stuff. Think about the kids that touch and manipulate toys every day. So. Yeah, that's it. And second part, what's pleasurable about touching things? Here we talk about what's a pleasurable tactile experience. That in order to get a good sense and a good theory of the aesthetics of touch, we should understanding as the possibility of appreciation in two loci. In two forms. That's pleasurable touch is in itself complex, and a little bit, I will say a little bit on the pleasurable touch and everyday aesthetics. So, what are pleasurable tactile experiences? So, this is something that comes from the philosophy of mind. I'm sorry again, but the idea is that our tactile experiences often seem to have a felt pleasant or unpleasant character. So that it's really inside the way in which we make tactile contact in the world that something can feel pleasurable, unpleasurable. And the full Fulkerson continued, this isn't simply an associated but distinct state of pleasure or pain that accompanies the perceptual experience, but part of the perceptual experience itself. So the idea is that when we touch something, the content of our perception is already loaded with a pleasurable or unpleasurable quality. If we think about instances of pleasurable touch, for example, the warmth of sunlight on the skin on a cold day, or the softness of a blanket, the smoothness of a polished surface. But again, we can have very unpleasurable tactile experiences, which are like, for example, touching something that is grimed, or wearing something that fit awkwardly, or sticky. Think about sticky texture that have this like weird and unpleasurable texture again. There are some reasons why there are some kind of tactile experiences that we really like and we find pleasure. And this is something distinctive of touch. So we have a kind of receptors in our somatosensory system, which is called CT afferents. And these things, which are located in basically the hairy skin of mammals, what do they do? Well, they are related to the part of the brain which is responsible for pleasure, basically. So the idea is that CT afferents are these kind of mechanoreceptive nerve fibers that respond to gentle touch. So when we gently touch the surface of our bodies, for example, someone touches us, they deliver this kind of pleasure in it. This is evolutionary reasons, because care and the relation with of a children with the mother, for example, with the father. That's probably the evolutionary reason of these kind of things, but this is something unique of touch. So we don't have this kind of receptor in the eyes, for example, or in the hair. So there are some kind of experiences of touch that are inherently pleasure, and there are reasons for that through the mechanic and evolutionary aspects of tactile experiences. And that's one. About two, since we have seen that touch as this kind of bipolar nature, so it involves both, on the one hand, bodily sensation and an awareness of the object that we are touching. So when we touch something, we are both aware of the properties of the object and of our body touching the object. The interesting thing is that this can yield to two different and distinct, but again, often co-occurring modes of appreciation of some of tactile experiences. On the one hand, we can appreciate the properties of the object that we are touching, and we will see that when we will consider the arts of touch. And again, we will see also, when we consider the art of touch, on the other hand, we can also appreciate the bodily effects that touching something or being touched by something can do. And these are two different kind of appreciation. So on the one hand, we are appreciating an object, and on the other hand, we are appreciating the quality of experience itself. This is something interesting for the aesthetics. And so think about appreciating a painting. When we appreciate a painting, we are not appreciating the qualities of our visual experience. We are appreciating the quality of the object, of the visual qualities of the object. And so, but touch is different. And a little bit on the complexity of pleasurable touch. So just to note that again, to stress that touch is not a complex sense. Think about when we touch something or we are touched by something, how much what we know about who is touching us or what is touching us, or what we feel in the situation, or what you think about morally about the situation or the context changes the way in which a touch or a tactile experience can feel pleasurable or unpleasurable. So these are some examples. Well, this is a nice book if you are interested in aesthetics, things in touch with the past. All the book tries to, she's an American philosopher, Caroline Kosmayer, and the idea is that knowing that we are in contact with something old as this kind of weird and unique experience, that when we touch it, we have a sense of intimate connection with the things, with that, a connection with the past, basically. And she argues that this is an interesting aesthetic experiences, and unique and uniquely accessible through touch. So this is one instance in which what we know, so knowing that we are touching something very old, can have an impact on the pleasure of the experience itself. So you have this sense of intimacy, of being, or think about, this is, for example, yes, being in touch with an old imprint of an hand. But think about being in touch with the T-shirt of the I don't know, your favorite singer, for example, or something like that. Also there, we can feel through touch a sense of intimate connection that gives us this kind of plausibly enhanced pleasure through touching something. And this is does not directly come from touching the things, but from what we know about the things that we are touching. So the idea is that in the philosophy of mind debate, there's all this debate about the possibility that our perceptual experience is cognitively modulated. So the idea that perceptual experiences can change based on what we know about the experience. Some says, yes, that's something that happens. Some says, well, it's not really the case, but something different is going on. Anyway, the only thing that I wanted to do is touch can be modulated through what we know, and this can lead to interesting aesthetic experiences, like being in intimate contact with something that happened. Another case is the case in which morality enters the picture. So, for example, in the care context, think about it. These are photographs from an exhibition by Michael Geller, which was a geriatric doctor, and started to make pictures about caring context. And the idea is that in caring context, a caress can feel different if we know about the moral standing of the persons that are in the caring context. And this is again something that modulates our tactile experience. Another, I think, striking example of how touch can be modulated, but our emotions or the context in which is, for example, the negative tactile sensation in harassment or in sexual harassment, for example, when, well, a caress can be very different if I'm touching my girlfriend, or if my girlfriend is touched when she's working in a bar by some stranger, right? So again, this is a contextual thing, and the same kind of tactile experience feel very different in the two different contexts. So basically that's another layer of complexity of tactile experiences. So it can be modulated by what we know, but what we feel by what the context in which we are in. And pleasurable touch and everyday aesthetics. So again, I'm speaking about what we experience every day. So I have not spoken about the arts. But there's all this trend in philosophical aesthetics, which, if you are interested in this stuff, you should read this book. And the trend is the trend of the everyday aesthetics, so trying to give a philosophical account of our aesthetic encounter with everyday objects, basically, or actions. This is Yuriko Saito, and this is an amazing book that revitalized, in a way, the debate on that. Western culture, Western philosophical aesthetics, basically, has centered on the arts mainly for the last 200 years, at least. While the idea behind everyday aesthetics is that we shouldn't analyze only the aesthetic experience that we have through engaging with the arts or artistic objects, but also when we engage with nature, for example, or with functional objects, or with just the things that we do every day. And it seems that touch in this context is super relevant, right? So it's a way, the example that I given, the 24-hour photographs about people make it very clear. So we touch plenty of objects every day. And since touch is inherently pleasurable, or maybe also unpleasurable, well, it has kind of aesthetically already loaded connotations doing something. And so yeah, there are a lot of things that we can focus if we focus on the aesthetic value of tactile engagement with the everyday. The first thing we will see is just pleasurable tactile experiences. Then the role of touch in care, the role of in sexual context, massages, game, and functional beauty. And then we will slowly go towards the arts, I promise you. So, well, in the everyday, when we touch something, as I said before, we can feel pleasurable experience, like the warmth of a ray of sunlight in a sunny day, in a sunny but cold day, for example. Walking barefoot can be very pleasurable, can be also very unpleasurable in some situations, right? Touching something, so exploring the tactile qualities of our shirts, for example, our favorite shirt, and so on and so forth. So we have pleasurable aesthetic experience every day, basically, right? So, or at least I do. I have pleasurable experiences with Lupin all day. I think you have them too in the context of our love and caring relationship with each other. So this is the dog I live in. The other one is his best friend, Tika. And yeah, so this is an important part of our relationship, touching each other or feeling contact with each other. And that's very pleasurable. Of course, it's pleasurable, the contact of people with other people, right? So it's pleasurable touching a loved one and so on and so forth. Well, clearly enough, touch is central in sex, right? So there's the concentration of receptor, of tactile reception that we have on the tongue, on the lips, and on the fingertips are like are the three places in which there is the vastest majority of mechanoreceptors. So they are super sensible. Fingertips, and yeah, these are also the loci of our engagement with the others. So yeah, everyday experiences, massages can be maybe the art of touching. But here the idea, and it comes again, one of the objections, the philosophical objection that I was mentioning in the beginning, is that all these experiences, yes, they are pleasurable, but are them aesthetics? So what's the aesthetic? You can ask. It seems that there's a difference between, or at least philosophers have distinguished between two pleasures. The hedonic on the one hand, and the aesthetic on the other. The hedonic, some argues that aesthetic pleasure is a kind of hedonic pleasure, a very specific kind of hedonic pleasure, but basically hedonic pleasure is sensory pleasure, pleasure that we find in all the things that I just said, in a caress, in a sexual encounter, in a positive tactile experience with a pleasurable object, and so on. But what makes an experience aesthetic? So the idea is that the aesthetic in the philosophical tradition is something that has a place which is very specific and is more, let's say, highbrow. On the one hand, it's that there should be an object that we can share our, to which we can share our experience. So the idea is that, well, there's an object designed for appreciation. And all the experiences that we have are like more private experiences. In the Kantian tradition, aesthetic experience is something that should be disinterested, and a lot of the experiences that I mentioned are not disinterested in the Kantian sense. There's utility. in that. An aesthetic experience also in the aesthetic tradition a lot of the time is described as something that should be universal. So if I give you a judgment which is a merely hedonic judgment, I'm saying I really like this table. I'm not trying to convince you that you should like the table. I'm just stating, well, I'm judging the table as the fact that I like it. But when I'm making a judgment which is aesthetic, I'm saying, oh, this table is beautiful, and I will try to give reasons of why I think the table is beautiful. I'm trying, in a sense, to convince you that the table is beautiful. So it seems that there's a difference between merely hedonic and subjective pleasure and aesthetic pleasure. But again, here, I think that we can see even in the everyday that there's an aesthetic, interesting dimension that can be given rise through touch. And one is through an analysis of games. So this is another, again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, an amazing book on the arts of games. So basically, what this philosopher is arguing is the game should be considered art, and that the thing that games do is to shape our agency, basically. So games are the arts of agency. Are the arts of agency because given a set of objects and a set of rules, they shape the way in which we move, interact, or do something with the world. And this is the matter of games. So like visual art, the matter of visual arts is shapes and form and color. The matter of games is the way in which they made us act. And that's the focus of our appreciation. That's why games can be considered aesthetically interesting, because they give rise to this kind of very peculiar sculpting of our agency, of our way of acting in the world. And if that's true, there is a set of games that are very interesting because we touch them. Well, these are very basic, but there are some games like the toys in which we have a very basic tactile interaction with the objects, so that's interesting. But there are games like Lego or these things that shapes our way of interacting with the world through tactile contact. And if when is right, and this way in which they shape our agency is aesthetically relevant, and that's something that we should value aesthetically, also games and games that have touch as is their main sensory component should be valued in that way. And another interesting context in which we can see that the aesthetic arises out of ordinary objects is functional functional objects. So there's all this trend of philosophical analysis which focuses on functional beauty. What's functional beauty? We design objects of design or architecture. They are meant to be used, and the use of that object elicits a peculiar experience. And when an object is fit for the function that it is meant to accomplish, for example, a keyboard is very well fit for my writing on my computer. I am feeling this kind of, or at least this is what this philosopher argues. I am experiencing an aesthetic quality which is called functional beauty. So how well an object is fit for the function that is meant to accomplish. So this is common for functional design objects, but also for architecture we can experience this kind of functional beauty. Some of these authors also argue that we can appreciate animals for the fitness of the function. The idea is that, for example, when I see a leopard, which is so aerodynamic and the body is so aerodynamic that it seems built for speed, then we can look that is fit for the function that is meant to be accomplished. And yeah, you're laughing, but there's a paper on that. And yeah, but the idea is that we can see that something is fit for function also through touch. And this comes from a paper on feeling fit for function, which has been written by Roberts. The idea is that suppose that on a crisp winter's night you construct the perfect snowball. A faultless sphere that fits neatly in the palm with just enough heft and texture for throwing without risk of injury to its victim. Not being unusually large or small and lacking any embellishment of form, the snowball has no contrast standard features. Its features are all indicative of how effectively the snowball could be propelled with force and accuracy towards an adversary. As you roll in your hand, it has a pleasing haptic quality that we can call feeling fit for function. So here the idea is that there's this aesthetic quality, fit for function, that can be accessed or through vision, because something looks fit for the function it is meant to accomplish, or can be touch as being fit for function. Another example is from a design object, or at least a sport object, a Bianchi, but you can extend this view to a lot of objects. And basically that's the second part of the presentation, and I don't have water. No, don't worry.
No worries.
And we enter the realm of the arts, which I think is the thing that interests you. I have to say this part is mainly due to Camilla, my colleague. She is the expert, as I said. She works basically on contemporary art and what's the experience that we have with contemporary art. So that's the topic of her PhD thesis. So we have already seen that there are some aesthetic properties that can emerge from our engagement with everyday objects or everyday design objects. There are this we individuated. Thank you so much. If you want to categorize some works of art as being the arts of touch, what we should do? Well, there are some arts which are, we call quasi-haptics. So touch, there's bodily awareness in there, but if there wouldn't be touch, it would be okay. The work would still be there. So the instantation of the work is not dependent only on touch or necessarily on touch. An example is dance. Another example is sculpture, bas reliefs. We can touch these kind of things, of course, but if we don't engage through tactile experience with them, we can also, the object of appreciation would still be there. Architecture, again, we can visually engage with architecture without touching the material stuff. Music, touch is there, it seems. At least we think about going to a very loud concert, there are vibrations, or techno parties. It seems that tactile components are a huge and interesting part of our experience, but wouldn't there be there, it would be okay anyway. And yeah, so the idea that in all these works of art, or kind of works of art, tactile experience can be there, but if it's not there, it's not a problem, or not a huge problem. The object of appreciation, it still be there, and we can appreciate it through different kind through other kind of modalities. There is all these trends in contemporary aesthetics, which is called the relational aesthetics. So with scholars such as Michael Fried, Bourriaud, Claire Bishop, Julian Rebentisch, that emphasize the way in which there is all these kinds of works of art, of contemporary works of arts, that emphasize the relational and subject-centered character of the experience, which is necessary for the instantiation of the work. So the idea is that in all the work that you can see on the screen there, without the active engagement of the spectator or the experiences, the work will not be there. The first example is The Obliteration Room by Yayoi Kusama. And there, for example, what the spectator is called to do is to take a stick and then to put it on the wall. Without that, the work wouldn't exist. And the idea is that that also part of our aesthetic appreciation with this kind of installation art is the experience that we have when we actively engage with them. Without that, the work wouldn't be there. So it's both part of the characteristic of our appreciation and part of the ontological, let's say, the intrinsic nature of the work. Without our action, the work wouldn't exist, basically. And yeah, and it seems that the haptic arts could be seen as, well, proper haptic arts could be seen as an instance of this kind of subject-oriented relational works of art. So the idea is that for being an haptic arts, haptic experience should be a standard property. So without a tactile encounter with the object, the work wouldn't exist. So that's the idea. In all the quasi-haptic arts that I've shown you in the first slide of this section, if tactile experience is not there, it's not a problem. The work is still there. But in the haptic arts, and we will see some example of them now, without tactile experience, the work doesn't exist or doesn't really properly exist. And yes, so the idea is that given that tactile relation with the work, which is necessary, the work also has this kind of peculiar qualitative experience which is tied to how our body interacts with surfaces. And we basically distinguish two kinds of haptic arts. Agent haptic art on the one end and receptive haptic art on the other end, and this is what I will talk about in the last part of this presentation. Agent haptic arts are works of art whose instantiation, so their existence, depends on deliberate object-directed manipulation. So we should do something with an object, and doing something with that object instantiate the work of art. And then we have receptive haptic art, and we are not meant to use our active touch. We don't have to manipulate or explore an object. We just have to stay there passively and feel the sensation of our bodies. And so basically are works in which the instantiation of the works demands the participation of a body, but the body is not meant to do anything actively. So what are the first kind, the agent haptic arts? Again, the work is instantiated only through the viewer's active tactile interaction. So it is not realized. The work doesn't exist until the viewer manipulates the work. And again, we can see here that the appreciation can be directed through the manipulation in two different kind of qualities. The qualities of the haptic experience itself, so the manipulative part, and on the quality of the object. So again, we have the bipolar nature of appreciation that we've seen in the second part here comes in handy, because we can see that when we encounter this kind of works of art, we can focus our attention and our appreciation in two ways. So the phenomenology of touch in these works involve both the presentation of distal property, texture, shape, pressure, for example, and the concurrent awareness of one's bodily agency in navigating and disclosing these properties. And again, another thing which is interesting that I analyzed in the first part is the temporal structure of this exploration of the object. Some example of this kind of work are like what we call tactile manipulative experiences. So here the artwork is produced through the subject's manipulation of objects. So for an example is Franz Erhard Walter Werkstatz, in which the participants are meant to act with this elastic material together, and so feel the resistance, feel the quality of the materials, and the way in which we move together in order to analyze the material. Lydia Clark, Bicos, in which you have to manipulate that kind of object and discover the way in which it can be folded or unfolded, and other manipulator sculpture like Marta Cilindron, for example. In here, what should we appreciate? So what do the artists think that we should appreciate there? Well, it's the way in which they create objects that ask for exploratory movements. So without that, the artwork wouldn't exist. So this is a first kind of example. Another kind of example comes from Sugandha Gupta. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, but Sight of Touch. So she's a blind artist, and she produced this textile which we are meant to explore through. So the idea is that what we appreciate in this kind of works is the way in which we freely explore a material, basically a textural material, which is very different in the different part of the objects. And again, we can appreciate our way of exploring it and the qualities that we are disclosing while unfolding in exploration, which is interesting also because a lot of the things that we touch there are not qualities that we usually touch in our everyday life. And then we have this kind of weird situation in which maybe artists ask us for inclusion purposes or of making us understand what it feels like, but engage distal touch. So this is, for example, a work of art in which we are called to explore the world through a cane, basically, as a blind person would do. And here the idea is that we can appreciate, well, the experience itself, of course. And I'm saying, through touch, of course, we are accessing some kind of further meaning, right? So art is complex. There are things behind that. But the idea is that through touch, we can then access the meaning of the artworks. And without the instantiation, we couldn't. And then we have all the second part of interesting hapticals, which are the receptive hapticals, in which, as I said, the artwork does not require manual interaction, manipulation, or exploration through active engagement, but just asks us, in a way, to acknowledge the sensation of our bodies. And this work, again, engages somatic and proprioceptive awareness, such as thermal stimuli. We will see some example of that. Spatial orientation and vibrational resonances. So these are some examples. One was in Max in Rome, basically a cold room. And so you enter the room is cold, and that's the work. Again, here we are not meant to do anything, manipulate or explore. Basically, we just go there, we feel cold, and that's the work. Or Olaf Aurelius on 2 outer columns. Again, here it's just the sensation of hotness coming from the columns. Then there are some interesting interaction of the hot columns and the way in which they realize the color there, the shapes. So, but again, if there wouldn't be there the thermal components, the works would be very different. So this again is an instance of haptic art, but is receptive, thermal stimuli. Another is, I think, a very interesting, they don't engage our touch in a direct sense, but they impact the way in which our body feel, and we feel the space in which we are in. So one example are the corridor by Bruce Nauman, in which we are asked to enter, and even if we don't touch them, we feel this kind of oppression in the corridor, right? So it's like a way in which the spatial orientation of objects in the space impact our proprioception and our bodily awareness, which is very powerful. Another example is Monika Sosnowska, The Corridor, which has this very similar effect, or it's meant to have this effect on the spectator. But again, yeah, it's not interesting to manipulate or touch the thing. We enter there and we feel this kind of sensation, like it's a sensation that arises from the bodily awareness of the spaces we are in. And then we have all this kind of other arts. For example, this is a Lydia Clark performance in which basically she passes object through the bodies of the spectator. And so again, here we are not doing anything, but touch is central because we have been touched by very different kind of object and texture and sensations. And finally, we have the other quality, which is vibration. Again, I said in the everyday, for example, in the experience of music, vibration is very, very powerful, but it's not necessary in a strong sense, but there are some kind of instances which, for example, in Sonic Bed by Kath Matthews, we are asked just to lay down and the bed vibrates, and we are meant to feel this kind of tactile sensation, which is passive, but it's engaged through the specific kind of tactile properties, which is vibration. And basically that's it. So the category of haptic arts brings together works that are centered on haptic experience without, if we wouldn't touch them, the work wouldn't be there. Of course, these are a part of this kind of works of art that demand the interaction of the spectator with the work of art. So it's a subset of relational aesthetics, let's say. Maybe it's a subset of installation works of art. And the focus of appreciation can be in the object itself, in the experience, and in the bodily awareness that we have about engaging with the object or some properties of the object. And basically that's it. So why touch matters? Well, because in not a simple sense as the philosophical tradition seems to have stressed for a long time, because it integrates a lot of cutaneous sensation, but also proprioceptive, kinesthetic, thermal, and other channels, right? So it's rich in phenomenology if you think about it. And why it matters? Well, it matters because, as we have just seen, a lot of contemporary art and contemporary artists are trying to work with that kind of sensory channel, and so it would be interesting to really develop an aesthetics of touch which can encompass this kind of work and try to explain them in a good way. Yeah, I think that's basically it. And so thank you very much. And yeah. So, yeah. She's Camilla, of course, and these are our emails if you want to reach us. And but yeah, I think we have time for questions, right?
So yeah, I can take questions. So perhaps Jako will start.
Thank you very much. It was super interesting. I was wondering, because you focused on the experience of the viewer, of the audience, and I was thinking about more traditional arts when not performance but the artist has some kind of experience, and also this experience might be aesthetic, while she or he is creating some object, not only sculpture but it's in drawing, and of course it's in theater. That the haptic sensation is an integral part of the experience of the people, like creating something. So then there will be much more like haptic arts, including those. So I'm thinking how it did, whether you also explore this perspective and how it would fit in your classification, or maybe if this perspective was present in more historical text on art, because you, as you said, that this haptic dimension is missing. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just a question. I'm not sure that I got. So the idea is that when the artist creates something, there's a dimension but the dimension then got into the work. So that's the idea. So the dimension.
Not necessarily, but also it might be. Sometimes it might be the. Should I use mine? Yes. It might be both. I think we can then, like, the audience can see the body movement part and integrate it in the experience, but also, because I think that the creator might have also an aesthetic experience in the process of creation, and then it's something different because it might be combined with that. If I'm making a sculpture, so my experience might be combined with the visual part, but also the haptic one.
No, that's cool. I think that if I have to respond to reply philosophically, I think this wouldn't fit into the haptic arts strictly, because as we define them, haptic arts are the arts in which the audience engagement with the work is central. But I think this is a super interesting question, the way in which we perceive a spectator the action that an author has done in order to create the artwork. So I mainly worked on pictorial experience. My PhD thesis was on the perception of motion through static images, and one of the chapters was on how we feel the brush strokes, for example, right? So, for example, in Japanese ink paintings, they have all these very profound way of thinking about the gesture that they're doing when they reproduce something. And the gesture really for them enters the content and the meaning of the picture, which is super interesting. And in there, the spectator should extract the meaning through the gesture that is done. So I think that's super relevant of think about, yes, Pollock's drip paintings, in which the action was central in the creation, and we get some of the meaning of the works of art and of our aesthetic pleasure through engaging in them. So yeah, I think it's a super interesting part of an analysis, but which we have not done. but yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. That was really clear, concise, and fascinating. I want to push back a bit against the idea that there's a difference between haptic and quasi-haptic arts, and particularly those of sculpture and architecture. Is that me?
Oh, maybe it's me.
Anyway, you said that the haptic art, that for something to qualify as haptic art is for the audience to have active engagement, haptic engagement, without which the work would not exist. But that just strikes me as applicable to works of architecture and sculpture, classical sculpture. When we talk about minimalist art, like or post-war art, there I think it's even more pronounced, like the Bruce Nauman thing, or I don't know, Richard Serra or whatever, where your actual presence and the sense of things having a certain weight, and oftentimes you can even touch those things and all that. So that's part of the program, I would say. But also I think this applies to classical sculpture, without actually having a sense of its proper size, place, weight, and also the atmosphere that surrounds the sculpture, which is arguably also a haptic experience. The work wouldn't really exist as a work of art, and you said that it wouldn't properly exist. And I wonder what sort of legwork, what sort of what sort of baggage does this term here hide? Properly in the sense of it wouldn't be appreciated as a work of art. But then, I'm sorry, architecture, sculpture, it seems really necessary to actually walk through the building and feel the building, to actually appreciate it as a work of architecture.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you also to you for the question. But yeah, the idea is that I think this is more striking. I think I'm more in line with you with architecture. I also have a paper on architectural experience. But the idea is that, for example, take the case of sculpture. So sculpture, we can appreciate a sculpture even if we don't touch it, right? A lot of sculpture are produced, and really artists produce them with in mind the fact that the spectator would never touch the sculpture. Not only in our practice, but also today, if you think about abstract sculpture, a lot of them are not meant to be touched, but just to be displayed visually. And so the idea that the difference between a sculpture like that and an haptic artwork would be that, yes, we have a sense of tactile qualities when we watch this sculpture. This is important, but also when we watch a painting, we have a sense of the tactile qualities of the things that are depicted in the painting, right? But we are not. Yeah, we can appreciate the painting even without touching, also because we cannot touch the virtual space inside it. And the idea is that with sculpture, yes, and there's all these trends of people that, for example, Robert Hopkins have a nice paper on that, and Susan Langer has written about that, but that we can visually, through vision, then tactily engage with something, but it's not necessary for the sculpture to be touched in order to be a work of art. While with the idea is that the difference with the haptic arts is that if we don't manipulate the objects, or we don't get into properly tactile contact with the object, the work really doesn't exist at all. So the interaction itself, the interaction is the work of art. So, and this is all this trend of the relational aesthetics, basically. So the idea is that when we engage with an installation art, what we should appreciate it's not only the object out there, but it's the way in which the artist is plasmating our experience. And thence our experience is a locus of appreciation. There's a nice book and a nice paper, and well, Elisa Calderola is working on that. And yeah, I think that's the main difference. And I would push back on that in this way. And maybe it's not convincing, but I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Other corners of the room, perhaps? Don't be shy. I won't be shy either then. My question. So one thing that happens in aesthetics often regarding those so-called lower senses, which is often disputed anyway, like smell and taste and touch, is that at least with the two first of them, the aestheticians talking on their behalf usually point to one specific artistic or practice that was falsely not labeled artistic but has deep roots, kind of that there's some kind of expertise, some kind of criticism, even as in our high cuisine culture or the culture of food or the perfumery. So that and then the explanation is, look, these for some kind of not really important, kind of superficial reasons, but excluded from the area of art, properly so called, but we should embrace them, we should include them. So I wondered whether, and you were talking about that, but whether your argument might not be made in a kind of more interesting way, at least to me, is kind of pointing to that area of already established practice in our culture that was not embraced yet by artists, but should be. And then if so, it seems that there is this area of practice, sex. And so I just wanted to ask you about that, like whether you would like to go there, and if not, why not? Because it seems to me as a sphere that is, tactile in a way that might also give you a good way to answer Jakub's question. Like it's only tactile. You're supposed to close. We often close our eyes. This is the primary sense for us sexual people, and there are some. It's very complex as well. It's intercourse. It's between people. So there is also this kind of there's a lot of meaning, like very complex meanings in it. So it seems to me as an ideal culprit for, say, artistic exploration or for kind of embracement by artists, the sexual sphere.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, well, that's super interesting. I thought a little bit about that. In fact, I think in two everyday practices that I found that could be that could go in the direction. One is sex, of course, and the other is massage. But right, well, as a version of maybe. But the idea is that in order to have an artistic practice, we have someone that designs, right, experience or the artwork. So the idea is that would be, then we can consider or the couple or the group of people that is making that as the artist, designing the experience in a way. But that would be an interesting thing that is missing from the literature too. So yeah. This kind of tactile encounters that we have with the everyday and the way in which we can design or maybe just ideally design them in order to extract the peculiar kind of aesthetic properties and meaning that can be realized in that kind of experience. I think that there's some, I'm not an expert on that, but I think that there are some things on that, maybe some, yeah, but yeah, thank you so much. I think that's super interesting. Yeah.
game. No one wants to raise his or her voice in defense of sex as a sexual practice.
As an artistic.
Not really.
Perhaps fashion might be an interesting kind of area to discuss here in connection to this topic. And one wants to. Okay, so then let's close it and we can continue talking around the table. You're all welcome, but we will stop that machine over there.
With a beer.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you.